Thank you. We are about to begin our program, and I welcome you all to our special event celebrating Susan Isaacs and the launch of her 14th novel, Takes One to Know One. I'm Amy Bass, and I'm president of Friends of the Library, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. I would say our program is being streamed live on Facebook and on YouTube, and the link to both of those is on the library's website. So we want you to know that. Got my glasses. Susan's new book has received excellent reviews. I don't know how many of you have seen today's Newsday, but it's a wonderful full-page article. It's great. And we've given copies to you on your chairs of reviews that have been coming in all week, along with our new Friends of the Library brochure, which explains to you what the Friends does and what we support in the library. Our program today is in interview format. Susan suggested that instead of a talk by her, she would prefer a conversation that is back and forth with an experienced interviewer. And so that's what we're presenting today, a conversation between Susan and interviewer Adina Gen. We expect the conversation to last approximately 45 minutes, and then we'll have about 15 minutes of questions from the audience. Our afternoon will conclude with book sales in the adjacent Adler Art Gallery and a reception. Susan Isaacs has been a resident of Port Washington for some 4 decades. She is a graduate of Queens College. Before she tried writing a novel, Susan was an editor at 17 magazine and a freelance political speechwriter. Susan began working on her first novel, Compromising Positions, when her daughter Betsy, who is with us today, began nursery school. Susan currently chairs the board of directors of the literary organization Poets and Writers. She is past president of Mystery Writers of America. She belongs to the National Book Critics Circle, PEN, and the International Association of Crime Writers. Susan has been honored by many organizations, including by us, the Friends of the Port Washington Public Library. We honor Susan with our library's Susan Isaacs collection. Indicated by a book plate, in case you haven't seen it, it's this, affixed to each book. The collection is devoted to books on women with a special focus of balancing work and life. Among the newest books in the library's Susan Isaacs collection are Outsiders, 5 Women Writers Who Changed the World, and also Work Wife, The Power of Female Friendship to Drive Successful Businesses. Each May at our Friends of the Library's annual Book and Author Luncheon, Susan volunteers as our moderator. As we say every year, many of our luncheon attendees come specifically to hear Susan as she brilliantly introduces our guest authors. Susan's interviewer or conversationalist today will be Adina Gen, a journalist and a digital expert for Long Island Business News. Adina herself is the author of several books, including Everything I Know About Business I Learned at McDonald's. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Newsday, and Long Island Press, among other publications. She has taught news writing at Adelphi University and Farmingdale State College. For 5 years, Adina worked for the online news service Patch, covering Long Island and especially Port Washington. Like Susan, Adina is a graduate of a New York City college. In Adina's case, it's Hunter College. And like Susan, she is a resident of Port Washington. And so, at long last, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Susan Isaacs and Adina Gen.
Thank you. I guess the mics are working. Okay, so I wanted to start off by thanking the library for having this event, thanking the friends of the library, especially thanking Amy Bass. I'm honored to be here. Also, I just wanted to take a moment to say we have such a great library. It offers a little bit of everything. You can come here for art. It's got a world-class children's library. You can come here for a concert or a talk like this. When I first moved here in 1995 and I came to the library, having lived in New York City, I was just so grateful that a place like this exists. So I wanted to say what a pleasure it is, Susan Isaacs, to share the stage with you.
And vice versa.
Thank you. Congratulations on your new book, Takes One to Know One. It is published by Atlantic Monthly Press. Can you tell us a little bit about the plot?
Sure. The narrator is a former FBI agent who was just burnt out from working on anti-terrorism. And she found a lovely husband, adopted his daughter. They're living in a Long Island town, vaguely similar to Port Washington. And she's earning her living by being a literary scout for contemporary Arabic fiction, which was a major at Queens College. And sorry, this always happens at crucial times. She has a group of freelancers and has lunch once a week. And she begins to think that someone in the group, there's something odd about him. And she doesn't know why. She doesn't know if she's just manufacturing something. And little by little, she starts to look into him and pulls in her dad also, who's a retired NYPD detective. And on the theory that if her gut says it and some little clues say it, it kind of takes one to know one. And she certainly has a hidden life. And then one thing follows another. There's trouble ahead. And, but it's also a chance to write about women today. She's 38. She's smart. She's gifted. And she loves where she is, but she somewhat feels isolated and feels a little bored. And what do you do when you've had, not necessarily being in the FBI, but 10 years of a fabulous career? And then it's very calm and it's very pleasant. What do you do with the energy? What do you do with your need for adventure? And what do you do with yourself while you're, living your life? So I wanted to do both things, but mostly what I wanted to do was make a thriller, was make a book that people would say, but also have a great time.
Well, I have to say that that was me. I got to the point where, the thriller part, and then, like real life set in. I had to put the book down, and I was, I'm so annoyed that real life set in. I had to go take care of something. But it's really a great read, and the characters are very, very real, and the conversations, like you mentioned, like the story of today, women today, and the conversations they might have at home with their partner. It's hard to work out the issues with family and to put aside maybe where your great talent might be because you've got a priority with your family, and I thought you captured that really beautifully.
Great, thank
Yeah.
you.
So the reviews are in. I know we've given out, everyone should have a copy, but I just wanted to read a few of the sentiments that they're really wonderful. From the Wall Street Journal. Ms. Isaacs is a witty author, but comedy gives way to terror as Corey's the main character, Corey's inevitable confrontation with her dangerous quarry nears. All the foreshadowing and, I'm just going to say presaging, I don't know how you pronounce it, pays off in spades, and the scenes that tie up loose ends are a pleasure to read. And then from Newsday, as Amy said, a front page article, what is it that makes Susan Isaacs' book so delicious to read? She's funny, for starters, and that humor, combined with romance and old-fashioned murder mystery, tickles every feel-good bone in our bodies. So, in short, a really great read. So you've lived in Port Washington for 4 decades?
For 47 years, 48.
Oh, my, okay.
Yeah,
So do you remember moving here?
I do. I still have that memory.
Did you have that feeling that Corey had in trying to?
Sure. I mean, it was wonderful. I had never lived in a house before. We lived in an apartment in Queens. And I remember being thrilled, to be able to go out without taking an elevator. But on the other hand, I was isolated. You're home with very young children. You may have some wonderful friends. Bless you, whoever's. And your friends tend to be women whose children are in the same grade your kids are in. And they may be fabulous, and they may just be okay. But you really don't get out there. It may have changed since then, in part because the women having children today are older and savvier. Not so much my son Andy, but my daughter Elizabeth, when she was starting nursery school, I was 32 or 33, and in the mommy's room where you sit in case your kid becomes deranged, I was the oldest mother at age 33. So I think women today are better at networking because networking is a word in their vocabulary.
Right, and also, I guess, online, social media
Right,
that they have,
exactly.
and you worked that into the book really beautifully.
Thank you.
And when I moved here, I know I just had my husband and my daughter at the time, and so my daughter was, my daughter was set up in nursery school, my husband went off to his job, and I had worked so hard to get everyone going, and then it's like, okay, now
Now
what? And
Yeah.
I feel that you really,
Right.
honored that thought, and I'm sure it's still prevalent today. So what led you, your first novel was Compromising Positions.
Right.
If anyone hasn't read it, it's a really fabulous read about a woman who lives in Shorehaven, which is our town in the current book as well. And she finds out that her periodontist, of all people, has been murdered. And
Who else to kill?
which, it's just so funny how, who would think of periodontist, but it turned out he was a bad guy. But I won't give away the plot. But what led you to write that novel?
I was writing book. Sweetie, you have my purse. Could I have there are things, throat
Coughed up?
lozenges. Someone has my purse. Any stranger. Because I don't want to be froggy throughout the interview. And I was reading mystery after mystery. And in those days, when you came up the stairs of the library, there were shelves. There was an area right before you went in, off to the right, to the collection. And there were shelves, including a shelf of mysteries that were only 2-week books, not 4-week books. So I always went there, and I always, snuck out with a bunch of mysteries. And I'll get there. This isn't formal. We're neighbors.
You're home, right.
We're neighbors. So I was reading, and because I had time when Andy started nursery school, and if I say Betsy, you'll know who it is. Elizabeth was taking her nap. I had a few hours every day to read, so I was reading 4 or 5, 6 mysteries a week. It was probably unhealthy, but I love them. Also, the writing in mysteries as a genre, I mean, there are obviously terrible writers, but overall it attracts an intelligent, literate group of people who write them. And so I was very happy. And then you go from that thing to, another mystery by so-and-so, and you go to the point where you say, I think I can do this. And that's where a reader becomes a writer, or a possible writer. And of course, then the trick is, does that feeling, does it grow? Can you realize it? And because I had worked before I had kids, I worked as a writer, that I knew that the only way to do it was to view it as a job. So that was very helpful to me.
So to have the discipline.
To have the discipline, and given the choice on most days, even now, there's something I would rather do than write, even if it's looking at Zappos. I mean, but it's true, it's, there's always something. But if you go to work at the same time every day, it's the work gets done a
Right.
little, and I kept going. My husband, Elkin, was fabulous. When I had retired from 17, his retirement gift to me was an electric typewriter. So he was saying, and actually did say, your career isn't over. You can still write. And, I did some more freelance political speeches. I did a couple of freelance magazine articles like Bubble Bubble, Soil and Trouble, about phosphate detergents.
Do you remember where that ran?
New York Magazine.
Okay. Oh, that's a good byline.
It wasn't mine.
Oh.
But it was good, yeah.
Okay.
But that didn't engage me. What I needed to do was, even though to some degree I realize now that I'm introverted and that I sit alone in a room and tell myself stories and find that very satisfying. I needed a world, I needed a community to go to, but in this case, it was the one in my head. And so the more real Shore Haven became, and the The narrator, I had her voice was clearer. You know, I hear my characters. I mean, her closest friend had a Southern accent, and I could hear all that. So in a sense, I had my world around me.
So when you write your characters, they're fully developed. I pictured the dad. Corey was so real to me that at one point she was trying to figure out who she could lean on, and I'm thinking, go to Win. What?
Yeah.
I had suggestions for her. So she was that real to me. So do you have, like when you create a character, do you fully flesh out like what they do during their day and or does it all just sort of like fall into place when you write the story?
It's actually both. I mean, what I do is for most characters, I write a biography. Not for very minor ones, but I write a biography so I know all about it. I will not use 9/10 of it, but I know their lives. And as I'm writing it, as I'm creating their little biographies, I get to know them better. And I get to see sides of them that I might not see. This isn't a rule that all writers should follow. I keep saying that writing is an idiosyncratic act. I probably said this at the library luncheon before, that it's like making chicken soup or making love, that there are no two people who do it quite the same way. And so I don't recommend that you necessarily, if you're thinking of writing, but that's what I do. But I also observe people. I also make it up as I go along. I mean, I'll talk about the character, and suddenly I realize I need him to have hair because it needs to be described.
It shows up in the plot at
It
some
shows,
point.
or even a light shining on it
Okay.
as she's, but so they become more fully fleshed out that way.
Okay, that's note to self, because I'm an aspiring fiction writer too, so I'm going to start with, I'm going to try the biography. Do you ever wind up with characters that you just toss because you mention them once and then then later on in the book you realize this guy's not showing up again. Let's
Well,
go.
in that way, and If It Takes One to Know One, it was a major toss, because I started the book 5 or 6 years ago, and I knew the plot. I knew what I wanted to happen. And usually a character comes to me first. She, or occasionally he, says, you need to tell my story. In this case, I knew the story, but nobody, so I thought about it, and I didn't see this as a warning sign. I said, all right, I'll think up a character. And I did, and she was so interesting, and she had a really cosmopolitan background. She was the daughter of CIA guy, lived in the Middle East, knew Arabic, and was working at one point for the FBI. So there were similarities. But she was far more worldly, far more elegant, and I liked her. I mean, I admired her. But I'm just waving to my grandson over there, who occasionally makes knocking noises, and he should persist. So one night, I think it was about 2.5 years after I started, the book was just about done. I mean, I'd have to go through it once or twice and mark it up. And I said, I don't like this. I don't feel her. I don't, I mean, she has a family, whatever it was, I wasn't comfortable, and I knew then that I was going to have to throw it out or attempt to sell a book that I didn't love or I didn't like. And if I don't like it, you're not going to, and Newsday. So I threw it out, and I took a couple of weeks, and I was really, to say down in the dumps is, putting it mildly, but I was, and I started thinking about, well, I love the plot. The plot's good. And then I was thinking about other mysteries and whether, the difference between whodunits and thrillers, and a whodunit being, often with an amateur, as I've written them, an amateur detective who kind of trips over a body and then feels obliged to solve the case, as in the case of Compromising Position or After All These Years. But a thriller is somebody who goes out on an adventure. In the sense, they're both similar in that they're trying to get the scales of justice back in. So I was having all these profound thoughts, which beats writing, and I started thinking about some mysteries I have loved, and thought about Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which I had liked a lot. I didn't love it, but it does have, I think, the best opening line of any crime novel, crime fiction. I dreamed last night I dreamt last night that I was back at Manderley, and it kind of evokes that old, you learn this magnificent old house on the coast in England, and I thought, I dreamed last night I was back on Queens Boulevard. and that did it. That was my in. That was, I had my character. And she wasn't sophisticated, and she didn't have a parent in the CIA or the diplomatic corps. She was, her dad had been a cop. And as she was describing her dream to the husband, something magical happens in the dream, which is a grilled cheese sandwich comes into her hand, and it's from a luncheonette. Her mother says, "Don't go in there." And once I had her, once I was grounded in her world, which was, middle-class Queens, then to bring her to Long Island to have her meet and marry someone, even though she says she's a great egalitarian, she basically thinks he's better than I am. And or knows his way around the world better. So all of that is is lovely and wonderful, but she still has this strong sense of adventure, a strong sense of right or wrong. And because her mother is an actress and at the top of her career had half a season on Days of Our Lives, she she's good at what she does, and what she did for the FBI was use her Arabic to interview people, and she's great with people. It's not high adventure. She's not the female equivalent of Tom Cruise or anything like that. She's a very strong, savvy person who also can kick. My grandchildren are here. They know exactly what I'm going to say, but I won't say it.
We're in the library.
Right.
Well, how do you know so much about investigations and FBI work, et cetera?
Well, it started when I was writing Compromising Positions. My husband had been in the now well-known Southern District in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and then he had gone back to be chief of the criminal division there. So through him, the social gatherings, there were assorted FBI agents and what have you. And then I'm a great believer in having lunch with cops. So right from the start, I called up the Nassau County PD, spoke to the head of PR and said, I'm writing a book. I'd like to talk with a homicide detective. So I did, and I spoke to him again several times over the years. I did the same thing when I was writing Magic Hour, which has a male narrator. And spoke to someone out there. I also, when I was writing a novel about domestic terrorism, which was Red, White, and Blue, I applied, and about 8 or 10 months later was approved to go down to the FBI in D.C. at headquarters. And I not only spoke with the agents who deal with domestic terrorism, but a psychologist, sociologist from Quantico about, where these right-wing militia types, what are their thought processes. And I also stayed online for 3 years under another name, not participating, just reading the garbage that the radical right was spewing, racist, anti-Semitic, homophobic, anti everything, and wildly anti-feminist. What are they doing with our women? Look what they're doing, how they're changing, So I had a very strong background, and then once you have lunch with somebody, just the breaking of bread, you at the end of the lunch, I'm sure you as a reporter say, if I have any more questions.
Can I reach out?
Right. Oh, yeah, sure. And I have a terrific pathologist who will, tell me all sorts of horrible things about what happened. He once took his family, he said, I'm sorry I took so long to get back to you. I took my family to Disneyland, I said, or Disney World. I said, how'd you like it? He said, it was fabulous. He said, but it's so good to be back at work. So it's really, part of it is doing what Corey does, is being a people person. Um,
I've dealt with the Nassau County, and my brother's a former police officer, so but they were never so gracious when, when I called, so I don't know if things changed,
Yeah.
or maybe I didn't ask the right questions.
Maybe it's lunch.
Maybe, that might be. Okay, so are any of your characters based on people you know?
No.
Okay.
There's never any one-to-one correspondence. And I was always really careful to not to copy people from real life. Because there's so many Romana plays where, someone, for example, was outed by Updike and went around saying, yes, I was outed, but it's all for the best, and I'm in an Updike book. I think, there are ethical problems with that. Maybe I could overcome it if that was my need to do one-on-one. But as you observe people, you pick up things. The most I'll ever do is occasionally, now that they have all those great images, I'll write 60-year-old man from Indiana images, and I get faces that are incredible, and suddenly I'll see a face. And then I'll go and pursue, if the face has a name, I'll pursue it, get some more images. So, but usually that's not necessary.
It's like a prompt.
It's a prompt. And listen, sometimes you see them, you make it up, you're looking into their eyes, and, you see that the whites of their eyes are yellowing, and you start, whatever it is, but there's nobody there.
Right. Okay. So we're safe around you. Right?
Oh, yeah, you're safe.
Okay. Let's see. Do you have a lot of plots running through your head?
Yes, but I suppress them.
Okay.
Because I cannot, I have, there are medical names for it, but I do have trouble concentrating. So that when I do concentrate, I tend to focus very strongly, and the rest of the world sort of fades out. So that if I were to think of two plots, I would be crazed, and or unable to write, because there would be too many things. I need to go to a universe. When, after my first book, I was writing up in our bedroom on a metal typewriter table. And then in 1979 or 80, when computers came in, this was like a giant IBM display writer. It was like, having a pair of twins. It just displaced a lot of space. And my husband built an office for me downstairs, right next to the laundry room. And, well, it was the only place in the house that, where we had the space, so I kind of would hear the thump, 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 thump. But that was okay, because there was a regular beat to it. What was I saying? I don't know. But anyway, I have trouble, I have trouble.
Right, plot lines. If you have
I
any,
have-
yeah, I was just following along with you.
I have, yeah, I have trouble concentrating. That's why it was very difficult for me in the 80s when I did 2 films, Compromising Positions and Hello Again. It was very difficult to work on the novel, which had a due date, and work on the film at the same time. Um, The director was kind enough to let me use his trailer
You were on set?
when I was on set. And so I could go and work a little. That took enormous concentration, which I probably have lost.
Well, Compromising Positions starred Susan Sarandon, right, and
Yeah.
Raul Julia. It's not, we can't find it, right, in the...
No, you
can't-
cannot find it unless you have a VHS. It
Okay.
is,
I remember it being a
so-
very fun film.
It was a fun film, and it was, it had, Edward Herman, Josh Mostel, Judith Ivey. It was a great cast.
And you were on set with them?
And I was on set with them. I was also on set with Hello Again, but Hello Again was not initially an independent production. It was picked up by Disney. So I was flying back and forth to Burbank.
Who starred in that? Oh,
Dear
sorry.
God in heaven. Shelley
Never mind.
Long
Ah, okay.
and thank Gabriel Byrne and Judith Ivey. again.
Nice.
So, but I wound up collaborating not just with the director, not just with the star, but with Disney executives. And, they gave me notes, and I would fly back, rewrite the script according to their 7-page, single-spaced suggestions. And what I finally realized was that I was essentially sabotaging my own script. But what I didn't realize that it would have been better to quit. Now, it's still a cute film, and it still has really nice moments in it, but I'm not one who can say, well, this is how it happens. And even when I said, no, I don't want to make this change, and they say to you, well, we'll have someone else do it. I was too tenacious. I probably should have said, be my guest.
Okay.
But, you don't, as a novelist especially, you fight for what's yours. This is, you created these people. This is your universe, and you're, even though it's a small g, you're God, but lesser deities are trying to mess with it.
Right. Suddenly there's all these other elements at play, right? And so
Right.
you lose control that way, I guess, or you don't.
Yeah, yeah. So that was kind of it for me. Although I used my sadness at not being a part of the world in Magic Hour. I had the suspect in a murder case is a former is a screenwriter.
Ah.
So
So you were heard.
yeah, well, and I killed the producer.
Do you see Takes One to Know One as the beginning of more? Will it be a
I do.
series?
Well, because the publisher insisted when I signed to do a second one.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm working on that, and I hope there'll be more. Before I started this, I knew that I wanted to do a series, which I had successfully avoided doing for 40 some odd years. But because I did not want to write, compromising positions, meets,
Like a podiatrist getting-
yeah, right, meets, or whatever. And podiatrist would be pretty. I like that. I wanted to be able, and so I wrote espionage novels like Shining Through. I wrote regular novels. I wrote sagas. So I had my complete writerly life, and then I said, I want to do one character that I love, who's interesting enough and has enough of a background to make it interesting, so it's just not repetitive. So I spent a long time not only developing her interests, but developing her family and friends, associates.
Getting back to Shorehaven
Yes.
and Port Washington, and that's really fun for us Port Washington residents because there's so many little spots that you're all going to recognize. Is that fun for you, or is it just making it very real? Or
It's less fun than natural,
okay,
because when I'm thinking, where would this group have lunch? And I decided Framboise, but it wasn't Framboise. It's called La Cuisine Delicieuse. And so I used it, but I changed it. The view is different. The way the tables are set up is different, but it just was such a natural thing to me. And the same thing, I mean, it happens that in this novel, where Framboise is, that Alpers is across the street. I don't call it Alpers. I call it something else, but it's, established whenever Alpers was established. So it's home base, but it can't be too close. First of all, I don't want to get, well, I'm not going to, Doris is not going to write me angry letters, but you don't want a one-for-one because that limits your imagination.
right. Well, there is, I don't know if we mentioned this, but there's this networking group that she's in. It's a group for freelance business owners, and I don't know if anyone here is from the Port Washington Lunch Bunch, but that's our freelance group that, so more realism coming into the book.
Right, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Are we okay with time? Okay. Okay, so do you see this becoming maybe like a Netflix series, or?
I would love it to be in it. Well, you love it until you love it. They made a Hallmark movie out of, what do you call it, after all these years. And it was, I very politely said, oh, it's wonderful. I didn't want to, but it was perfectly dreadful. To begin with, they changed her best friend, who was chair of the high school English department, from black to white, which annoyed me, and then made another character who was kind of morally iffy. They changed him from white to black, which I didn't like either. But, I mean, it's just that the humor was forced, it was, but, so, look, if you're gonna sell your work as a writer, you know that they can do anything with it. They can animate it if they want to. And, yeah, and have Minnie Mouse, playing Corey Geller. So you just have to say either, as the late Sue Grafton did, I'm not going to sell it, or you sell it and you're compensated for whatever anguish you feel.
I guess unless you're the producer, maybe? Like, unless you're maybe the producer?
If
does
you're
that,
the
does that give
producer,
you more
you're still
control?
the writer.
Okay.
You're still, even if you're a screenwriter, as I was, look, we were making compromising positions, and there was one scene where the husband and wife, Susan Sarandon and Edward Herrmann, have a big fight, and it was, so they shot it, and right after, the director said, cut, and he said, Susan, that was wonderful. And I started saying, thank you, and I realized he was talking to Sarandon. So the writer, you don't get a lot of.
Well, I haven't read the Bosch series, but like we're addicted to that. If you, I don't know if you could get that producer, or I don't know how that.
That would be wonderful. And Michael Connolly is just a wonderful writer and a lovely guy.
Oh, okay.
Lovely, nice
Good
guy.
to know. So what is your advice for aspiring novelists? It's changed. The publishing world has changed so much.
It's changed radically. I think you still have to, a novel is still a novel. You have to, it's not, the more you are basically writing it to become a movie, the less you will succeed as a novel. So you have to think of it as you're writing a book, and it's a job. And as I said before, you have to go to work. Now, if you already have a job, then it's your second job. Or if you have a job and have a family, it's your third job. It's hard to do, but people do it. They may not do it every day. They may say, all right. I mean, there are some people who say, I'll work for an hour at night, or get up an hour early in the morning, or I'll do it on the train, or, which is what Scott Turow did.
I didn't know that.
As he commuted, yeah. But there's also, if you have a job, you'll work regular hours, and you say every Saturday and Sunday, either I won't go out at night, or I'll take, 3 or 4 hours on late Sunday afternoon or early Sunday morning, and that's going to be my my time to write. And you have to go to work. And it's amazing once you limit your time to write, how it really helps your writing. I mean, after my kids went to college, I found it very difficult, except I knew to this day, my day, anything productive that I do stops at 3 o'clock. Just because, I'm not taking them to Hebrew school, or, they were insisted on bowling. There was a bowling alley in Port Washington. I offered them, wouldn't you like riding lessons? No, they wanted bowling. I said, okay. So much for my flirtation with upward mobility. And so that was it. And now still, I can only write for 2 or 3 hours a day.
So you turn off the phones, like no phone, no email, or do you
Pretty, well, the more you do that, the better it is for you. And if someone, listen, I'm not a neurosurgeon. Nobody, we've got to call a novelist. Oh, God. So yeah, you can do it, and there are apps like Freedom that you can get to, so you can't go, but it's easy to turn it off.
Right.
I mean, if you're really committed, that's why I never ever even looked at the game Candy Crush.
Oh, that was
Because
smart.
because I knew I would be doomed.
What about like getting an agent? Is that seems sort of like impossible? It's like getting the
It's
witch's
difficult.
broomstick.
It's difficult. I would strongly suggest, I speak as board chair, but Poets and Writers, PW.org, has wonderful articles on how to find an agent. It's doable for some. If they hear it's fiction, they are less interested than if it's nonfiction. And when you send in your query, it should be more sort of like your book, have the spirit of your book and be relatively short. But there are people who self-publish. The thing with self-publishing, though, is you can sell it. You can sell it to your friends, and if hopefully you have a large extended family, and but to be successful, you also have to be, when you self-publish, you have to self-market.
Right.
And or hire someone, which is either expensive or extremely difficult. So that too is doable.
So this is the beginning of your book tour, right?
Yes, you are the beginning, you are the start.
So where else are you going?
Odd, I don't know. Well, they just pick places, A, that'll pay your airfare, B, that have, certain group of people that, you must go to. So I'm going to several places in Florida, including the Miami Book Fair, which is
that's
a lot
exciting.
of fun.
So do you sit at a table at one of those things, or do you
Oh, yeah, but
speak,
no,
or-
but you speak.
Okay.
Either you speak or you're on a panel. And then later in the season, I'm going to be down there doing Books and Books, which is one of the great bookstores, independent bookstores. And I'm going to Detroit, Toronto, Boston. I really don't know. It's all on my website,
Okay.
SusanIsaacs.com. But there's less touring now than there used to be, unless you're a first-time writer and the publisher wants to spend a lot of money on you.
Okay. So it's, but it's pulling you out of your, you're staying home and writing.
Right.
So like now you've got to speak publicly.
Yeah, and some of it, some of it is, I'm up here.
Right.
I can do this.
Yeah.
But it's day after day of it is exhausting. Because that's not what I do well. I do well,
The writing.
writing and not being spontaneous and delightful, 4 times a day.
Right.
So that's a little hard. For other I have some pals like Mary Higgins Clark, Harlan Coben, people like that. They are outgoing people. How they became novelists, but they did, and this is just what their personalities, and they do. They're not only, they not only write books people want to read. They love being on book tours. And and then afterward, after a book and author event in the evening, someone will say, "Hey, you want to go out and get a drink?" And they'll say, "Sure." And
You want to go back to your.
I want to go back to my room.
So finally, I wanted to ask you, because you're very involved on Long Island as a literary figure. I mean, you're not figure in terms of a character, but just in supporting literature and supporting the arts. So I know you're very involved with the Authors Luncheon here, and I wondered why that's so important to you.
Well, I'm a big believer in being involved in your community, in the best way that you can, or as much as you can tolerate. No, but I feel very much a part of the literary community. I was president of, as you said, Mystery Writers. I was at one point on the board of PEN, and now with Poets and Writers. You've got to give back, and whether it's your synagogue or church, or whether it's some political group that you feel passionate about, you just don't sit there like a lox and sabars. You have to get up, and if not, take charge and make all these rocky success signs. You have to work at it. So that's
Okay. Well, those are basically my questions. Thank you. I know we're going to open it up to questions from the audience, but Susan, I just wanted to thank you again for, inviting me as part of this. Yeah.
it's been a
It's been
pleasure.
great.
It really has.
For our audience, we will have questions. If you raise your hand, we'll acknowledge you. I'll repeat the question to make sure that everyone can hear it. Following the questions, I have a few announcements from Friends of the Library. While I'm announcing, Susan and Adina will gracefully leave the stage, and Susan will move to the corner of the art gallery where Dolphin is selling books, and Susan will be signing. And we have a wonderful reception for all of you. So the program isn't over. We hope you enjoy the books and the food, and now we'll have questions. Over here. Okay, two questions. One, has Susan ever studied
No.
Arabic?
No, I
And
haven't.
Okay.
I don't read it, but I, I did a lot of homework reading about Arabic fiction, talking to Arabic speakers, et cetera, to become familiar with it. And there were some wonderful online columns about Arabic, contemporary Arabic literature online. And
The other question is, would you consider writing a book about older people?
sure, well, you know, there are older characters in this one. I just, when I decided on my character, I thought, you know, for 3 hours a day I can be 38. And that's what I felt like. I might have said 82, or I might have said 6. You know, it's what you want to be, what you want to your character to be, not only forget physically capable, because people can be physically capable at all ages, but you want them to feel that this is their passion, this is the most, what you're writing about in the novel is the most important thing in their lives at that time.
Okay. Other, yes, over there? Tom?
Can you tell us a little bit about that 3 hours you put in? Is it usually the morning to evening? Does the window shades have to be up? What's the temperature? Do you stop for
Okay, when Susan spends 3 hours a day writing, is it morning, is it night, are the
It's
shades drawn, or?
Well, no, the shades aren't drawn, but I write facing the wall. Again, because I don't want to, we have a glassed-in room in the back of the house, which was, I tried writing in there, except the bird flew by. And it was too much for me. I completely lost my train of thought. So I write facing the wall. I go approximately the same time every morning. And just because I'm more of a morning person. Sometimes you don't have that luxury. You know, if you're getting the kids off to school, unless you're waking up at 5, you can't do that. But as much as you can, I think it's best to stick with your body rhythms, you know, your chronobiology, and do it when it's best for you.
Okay, thank
But at the
you.
same time every day.
Over here, does Susan still read mystery novels, and what mystery authors does she like?
I do, but I read fewer than I did. Right now, I like Kate Atkinson, who's a British writer who created a character named Jackson Brodie, and not all of them are terrific, but most of them are really good, and she reminds me a little bit of Hilary Mantel in that she doesn't make it that easy for the reader, but then you get it and you say, oh boy. So, so she's good. You know, my friends send me their books, so I read those sometimes. And, but I read a lot of nonfiction as well. I read a lot of, not that much contemporary fiction, because I really like to go back. Once a year, I'll read one of my old favorites, and then read about it. So I'll go back to Emma, I'll go back to Jane Eyre, whatever it is. So, and then, truthfully, I love I love TV. I mean, my daughter was teaching. She's a philosopher, and she was at one point teaching a course in, I think it was aesthetics or TV or philosophy of film. And she said to her class, you know, you've heard of the golden age of television. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, you're living in it. And that really struck me, because there's so much good narrative on. I mean, and if you look at a show like, I don't know, the one with the drug, Elgin, the one with the drug deal, Breaking Bad, thank you. Breaking Bad is really very much like a Dickens novel in that it's a serial, you can't, like with Dickens, Dostoevsky too, wrote serialized novels. And they're really, it's a kind of 21st century take on the 19th century novels. And so I do that. So like everybody else, I have slightly less time to read. And that was a long answer to a nice, terse question.
Okay, maybe one more question, and then I have a few more things to say as I speak after this one question, then you two will leave the stage. Okay, question over here. In compromising positions, why did Susan choose that profession?
A periodontist, you mean?
A periodontist versus a
Because
dentist?
I was having gum trouble.
Okay,
And
now,
I went, and the dentist, with one of those sharp picks, gave me a poke, and I, you know, made a noise, and he said, well, you know, if this keeps up, you're going to have to see a periodontist. And that suddenly became a person to be gotten rid of.
okay. So, if Susan will be available to talk with you as we sell and sign books, and I have a few comments just to make from Friends of the Library. We thank you all for coming. Today's the beginning of our fundraising calendar, and we appreciate your support. I thank the entire Friends Board and our Friends photographer, Seth Ehrlich, who is a Friends husband. So we're very grateful for that. This is a group effort of our entire Friends Board who make everything possible for us. We're grateful to Keith Klang, the library director, and to the wonderful professional staff of our library who have worked with us to make today's program possible. I want you to ask if you might mark your calendars for a few upcoming Friends programs. October 19th in the afternoon in this room, we will have our semi-annual paperback swap. It's a lot of fun. You bring as many books as you want and take out as many books as you want. It's a wonderful sort of community event. On Sunday afternoon, November 10th, we will have our FOL University, which is our Friends version of University for a Day. And on Wednesday evening, November 20th, we will welcome for a return visit Pamela Paul, speaking about her new book, How to Raise a Reader. This is a special program for us in Port Washington because Pamela is a graduate of Schreiber High School, class of 1989. Your class? a year behind Andy, Susan's son. And Pamela is editor of the New York Times Book Review. It's kind of exciting, wonderful. So that is Wednesday evening, November 20th. So we look forward to welcoming all of you to these programs. We ask that you leave through the door over here, up these steps by the children's room, and we'll form a line going to the book selling, which is going to be outside the door that you entered. Dolphin is here. Susan will be signing. We thank you for joining us. Thank you for this supporting the Friends, and hooray for Susan Isaacs. Thank you very much. What do I want you? Can you take some?